The Grand Hall of the Galactic Council sparkled like a sea of stars. Thousands of different species filled the circular chamber, their bodies ranging from tall to short, scaled to furry, and everything in between. Light from 3 suns streamed through the crystal dome above, creating rainbow patterns across the gathered representatives of the galaxy's most powerful civilizations. Today was different from any other council meeting. Today, the humans were joining. Ambassador James Walker stood at the center of the hall, his simple black suit standing out among the colorful robes and ceremonial armors of the alien delegates. He looked small compared to many of the other species, but something in his stance made everyone pay attention. His gray hair caught the light as he turned his head, studying the faces around him. "Distinguished members of the Galactic Council," he began, his voice clear and steady. "Earth thanks you for accepting us into your community. We look forward to sharing knowledge, trading resources, and building friendships across the stars." He paused, letting his words sink in. "However, there is one important thing you must understand about humans." The council elder, a tall being with silver skin named Gray, leaned forward. "And what would that be, Ambassador Walker?" Walker's face became very serious. "Please don't make us mad." A wave of translator-aided laughter rippled through the chamber. Several delegates whispered to each other, some pointing at the human with their various appendages. They saw a small, soft species that had barely mastered faster-than-light travel. What could they possibly do? "Is this a threat, Ambassador?" asked a reptilian delegate, his scales shifting colors with amusement. Walker shook his head. "No, council member. It's a friendly warning. Humans don't like to fight, but we are very, very good at it. We would rather be friends." More laughter followed. Even Elder Gray smiled, his silver skin rippling. "Ambassador, while we appreciate your colorful warning, perhaps we should move on to more practical matters. Your species' achievement in developing FTL travel in mere decades rather than centuries is most impressive. We would be interested in learning more about your determination in this area." Walker nodded, but his eyes remained serious. "Of course, Elder. Though our rapid development of FTL travel is actually a perfect example of what I'm trying to explain. We didn't develop it gradually. We developed it because someone said we couldn't." In the upper galleries, Professor Mark, a historian from a species known for their perfect memory, watched with growing interest. Unlike the others, he didn't laugh. Instead, he made a note to begin studying human history. The meeting continued, moving on to trade agreements and territorial recognitions. But throughout the proceedings, Walker kept returning to his warning, working it into various discussions about cooperation and development. Each time, the council members treated it as a quaint human quirk, something to be politely ignored. As the session ended, Walker stood at the center one last time. "Thank you for welcoming Earth into the galactic community. We look forward to peaceful cooperation with all species. And please remember, we really mean it when we say don't make us mad." Later that evening, in the council's private chamber, Elder Gray met with his advisors. "What do you make of these humans?" he asked, sipping a glowing liquid from a crystal cup. "Primitive but eager to learn," said one advisor. "Their technology is crude, but they learn quickly," added another. "And this constant warning about making them angry?" Gray asked. The advisors laughed. "Obviously, an attempt to seem more threatening than they are." One said, "What could a species that just learned to travel between stars possibly do to worry us?" Gray nodded, but somewhere in the back of his mind, a small doubt took root. Something about Walker's eyes when he delivered that warning didn't match the behavior of a species trying to seem tough. It looked more like the expression of someone who had seen something terrible and didn't want to see it again. But surely, he thought, no single species could be that dangerous. Could they? 5 years passed quickly in the vastness of space. Humanity had established colonies on 12 different worlds, their ships becoming a common sight in trade routes across the galaxy. But something was changing. Professor Mark noticed it first. He sat in his study, surrounded by holographic displays showing human trade patterns. His species' perfect memory helped him spot the subtle shifts that others missed. "Look here," he said to his assistant, pointing at a chart. "Human mining operations have increased by 300%, but their trade in refined metals has only gone up by 20%. He waved his hand, bringing up another display. "And their colony ships. They're built with twice the standard armor thickness." "Why?" His assistant shrugged all four shoulders. "Humans are strange. Everyone knows that." Before Mark could respond, breaking news flashed across their screens. The Mercantile Alliance, a group of wealthy trading worlds, had announced a trade dispute with Earth. They claimed humans were undercutting standard prices and demanding immediate penalties. In the council chamber, Ambassador Walker stood calmly as Alliance representatives shouted their accusations. His hair had more gray now, but his eyes held the same steady look. "We understand your concerns," he said quietly, "but please reconsider your threats of a blockade. You really don't want to make us mad." The Alliance leader, a tall blue-skinned trader, laughed. "Still using that old line, Walker? Your species has been singing that same tune for 5 years. But what have we seen? Nothing but talk." Walker shook his head sadly. "The fact that you haven't seen anything is exactly why you should be worried." The Alliance ignored the warning. Within a week, their ships began stopping and searching human vessels near Earth's outer colonies. They expected protests, angry messages, perhaps even some pushing and shoving between ships. Instead, something very different happened. Human ships simply changed their routes. Trade slowed, but didn't stop. More surprisingly, Earth's many political factions, which had often argued in council meetings, suddenly presented a completely united front. Professor Mark noticed other changes too. Human ships disappeared from their usual social spots and space stations. Their crews became quieter, more focused. And strangest of all, their mining ships kept working harder than ever, but now they operated in silent mode, with their transponders turned off. "I don't like this," Mark told Elder Gray during an emergency meeting. "I've been studying human history. Did you know they're the only species we found that developed nuclear weapons, used them in war, and then chose not to use them again?" Gray waved his hand dismissively. "What does that matter now?" "It matters," Mark insisted, "because it shows they understand something that none of our species do: the full cost of total war. And that makes them very dangerous." The Alliance didn't see it that way. When their blockade failed to get the response they wanted, they decided to make an example. They seized a small human colony ship, claiming it was carrying illegal goods. The response was immediate. Every human ship in space activated their emergency beacons at once, broadcasting the same message: "You were warned. Please don't make us mad." Then, for the first time since joining the galactic community, Earth went completely silent. No communications, no broadcasts, no ship movements. Nothing. The Alliance celebrated, thinking they had scared the humans into submission. But Professor Mark knew better. He had seen something like this in human historical records. They called it the calm before the storm. In his study, surrounded by documents about human warfare, Mark began writing an urgent message to the Council. He had finally understood what Walker's warning really meant. He only hoped someone would listen before it was too late. Professor Mark couldn't sleep. For exactly 47 hours, Earth and all human colonies had maintained complete silence. No ships moved, no messages sent, nothing. He paced in his study, surrounded by historical documents about human conflicts. His perfect memory kept showing him patterns he didn't want to see. World War I, World War II, the Cold War. Each time humans fought, they invented new ways to win. Worse, they learned from every fight. His communication screen lit up. A message from Elder Gray. Emergency Council meeting. Now, the council chamber felt different without its usual busy noise. Everyone spoke in whispers, casting nervous glances at the empty human seats. The Alliance representatives stood at the center, trying to look confident. "The humans are weak," the Alliance leader announced. See how they hide. They know they can't stand against. The chamber's main screen burst to life. A single human face appeared. Not Ambassador Walker, but a woman in a military uniform, Admiral Thomas. Her expression was calm, but her eyes were hard. "This is Earth's Central Command," she said. "You were warned. You chose not to listen. You attacked a civilian colony ship. You have 48 hours to remove all Alliance ships from human space and issue a formal apology." The Alliance leader stepped forward. "Or what? You'll hide some more." Admiral Thomas didn't smile. "Or you'll learn why we kept warning you." The screen went dark. Professor Mark jumped up. "Please, Council, listen to me. I studied their history. Humans don't fight like we do. When they fight..." "Enough," the Alliance leader shouted. "We're tired of human threats. We're expanding the blockade to all human worlds. Let's see how they like that." Mark ran from the chamber. He had to finish his report, had to make them understand what was coming. In his study, he worked frantically. His screen showed human battle tactics from their many wars. Blitzkrieg, island hopping, guerrilla warfare. Humans didn't just fight. They invented whole new ways to fight. And they learned from every battle, win or lose. Hour 47 turned into hour 48. Earth's silence broke with a single message, broadcast on all frequencies. "Time's up." What happened next shocked the galaxy. Hidden shipyards, buried in asteroids and covered by sensor shields, opened their doors. The true purpose of all those mining ships became clear as hundreds of warships emerged from hiding places scattered across human space. But it wasn't just the ships that surprised everyone. It was how they moved. Human vessels attacked in ways no one had seen before, using tactics that made no sense until it was too late. Professor Mark watched the first reports come in, his hands shaking. "They spent 5 years preparing," he whispered. 5 years building ships in secret. 5 years studying how we fight. 5 years learning our weaknesses. And we thought they were just being paranoid." In the council chamber, chaos erupted as more reports arrived. Human ships weren't just fighting. They were winning. They knew exactly where to hit, exactly how to strike. It was like they had practiced this 1,000 times. The Alliance leader's confidence crumbled as news of defeat after defeat rolled in. But they're just one species. How can they fight like this? Professor Mark finally finished his report. The title was simple: "Why Humans Are Different." The first line read, "Humans are the only known species that has spent their entire history fighting themselves. They didn't develop weapons to fight aliens. They developed weapons to fight each other. And now..." He didn't need to finish the sentence. The galaxy was learning exactly what humans could do when they were truly angry. And this was just the beginning. 3 days after Earth's silence ended, the galaxy learned what human warfare really meant. Admiral Thomas stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Remember Earth, watching tactical displays light up with hundreds of green dots representing human ships. Each captain knew their role. Each crew had trained for this moment. "Begin Phase 2, she ordered. Across human space, warships split into small groups of 3 or 4. The Alliance had expected humans to attack in large fleets, like every other species did. Instead, these tiny groups struck everywhere at once, hitting supply lines, communication relays, and fuel stations. In the council chamber, Professor Mark explained what they were seeing. "It's called asymmetric warfare," he said, his voice shaking. "Humans perfected it fighting themselves. They don't try to match their enemy's strength. They attack where the enemy is weak." Elder Gray watched the tactical displays with growing horror. But how do they coordinate such small groups? "They don't, not completely," Mark answered. "Each group has a mission, but they make their own decisions about how to complete it. Humans call it initiative. Their soldiers are trained to think for themselves." The Alliance's large fleets found themselves chasing shadows. Every time they gathered enough ships to crush a human force, that force would vanish, only to appear somewhere else entirely. And while the Alliance wasted fuel and time hunting these small groups, human engineering teams were busy with something else. They were building bases everywhere. "Look at this," Professor Mark said, pointing to a new report. "They're not just fighting. They're setting up repair stations, fuel depots, and supply lines as they go. They're not fighting a battle. They're fighting a war." The difference became clearer each day. Alliance ships had to return to their home bases for repairs and supplies. Human ships could repair and resupply at hundreds of small bases scattered across space, bases that hadn't existed a week ago. In her flagship, Admiral Thomas received a message from Ambassador Walker. "The Alliance still refuses to back down," he reported. "They've asked their allies for help." Thomas nodded. "Just as we expected. Begin Phase 3. Across human space, something new appeared. Small, fast ships loaded with electronic warfare equipment. The humans called them wet weavers. They didn't attack with weapons. They attacked with information. Alliance communication networks began to fail. Their targeting systems showed phantom ships. Their navigation computers gave wrong directions. And through it all, human ships kept striking, kept vanishing, kept appearing where they weren't expected. Professor Mark worked day and night, trying to help the Council understand what was happening. "Humans have a saying," he told them. "War never stays the same. They don't just learn from their victories. They learn from their defeats too. Every time they lose, they figure out why and fix it." The Alliance leader, his blue skin now pale with stress, finally asked the question everyone had been thinking. "How do we stop them?" Mark's answer chilled the room. "In all of human history, there's only one sure way to stop them." He paused. "Give them what they wanted in the first place, peace and fairness. Because if you don't, they'll keep fighting. And they'll keep getting better at it." On the Remember Earth, Admiral Thomas looked at her next set of orders. Phase 4 was ready. If the Alliance didn't surrender soon, they would learn just how much humanity had been holding back. Because this wasn't just about winning anymore. This was about teaching the galaxy a lesson it would never forget. Phase 4 began with a whisper, not a bang. Across Alliance space, their banking systems suddenly stopped working. Trade networks crashed. Supply orders vanished. And in every major port, cargo manifests changed themselves, sending vital supplies to the wrong places. Economic warfare, Professor Mark explained to the Council. Humans learned long ago that you don't have to destroy a nation to defeat it. You just have to break its ability to fight. The Alliance leader slammed his fist on the table. "This isn't war. This is. This is total war," Mark said quietly. "Something only humans truly understand." On the bridge of Remember Earth, Admiral Thomas watched the Alliance's economy crumble. She remembered the history lessons about how ancient human nations had fallen. Not from battles lost, but from supplies that never arrived, from money that became worthless, from systems that stopped working. "Begin the psychological operations," she ordered. Across Alliance space, every communication device began playing the same message. "We warned you. We asked you nicely. You chose not to listen." The message played everywhere, in homes, in offices, in ships. It couldn't be turned off. It couldn't be blocked. It just kept playing, over and over, in every language the Alliance used. Professor Mark's research team made another discovery. "Look at these battle reports," he told Elder Gray. "The humans aren't using their best weapons. They're holding back." "Holding back?" Gray asked. "Why would they do that?" "Because they're not fighting for revenge," Mark realized. "They're fighting to teach a lesson." The Alliance's allies began to withdraw their support. Nobody wanted to fight an enemy that could destroy your economy without firing a shot. An enemy that seemed to know your every move before you made it. An enemy that fought like nothing they had ever seen before. In the Council chamber, Mark gave another presentation. "Humans have fought more wars than all other known species combined," he explained. "They've had time to learn things we never thought of. They know that fear can be stronger than weapons. They know that confusion can be better than destruction. They know. He was interrupted by a new alert. The Alliance's largest shipyard had just surrendered, without a single human ship firing on it. The workers had simply given up. They know that winning isn't about killing. Mark finished. It's about breaking the enemy's will to fight. Admiral Thomas received the reports with grim satisfaction. The Alliance was falling apart faster than expected. Their ships were deserting. Their crews were surrendering. Their leaders were hiding. "Send the final message," she ordered. Every screen in Alliance space lit up with Ambassador Walker's face. He looked tired but determined. "You can end this now," he said simply. "We don't want to fight. We never wanted to fight. We just wanted to be left in peace. Surrender, and this ends. Keep fighting, and we will show you why our ancestors called war hell." In his study, Professor Mark found something that made him shiver. Records showed that humans had only used a fraction of their military knowledge. They had weapons they hadn't used, tactics they hadn't shown, technologies they had kept hidden. "They're still holding back," he whispered. "All this destruction, all this defeat, and they're still holding back." The galaxy was learning why humans had begged them not to make them angry. But the real question remained. Would the Alliance surrender before humanity decided to stop holding back? Because if they didn't, the storm that was coming would make this look like a gentle rain. The Alliance's last stronghold was their home system, protected by their largest fleet. 3,000 ships formed a defensive wall around their capital planet. It should have been impossible to break through. Should have been. Admiral Thomas stood on her bridge, looking at the tactical display. "Launch Operation History Lesson," she ordered. Across human space, every warship jumped into faster-than-light travel at exactly the same moment. The Alliance tracked them, expecting an attack on their fleet. But the human ships didn't head for the fleet. They didn't even head for the capital. "They're attacking empty space," the Alliance leader shouted, watching the tactical displays. They'd gone mad. Professor Mark knew better. He burst into the council chamber, waving data sheets. "It's not empty space," he yelled. "Look at the pattern. Look where they're gathering." The human ships had formed a massive sphere around Alliance space. Each ship was exactly the same distance from its neighbors, creating a perfect grid in 3 dimensions. Then, every human ship activated a new device at the same time. The Alliance fleet's sensors went dark. Their communications died. Their navigation systems failed. Even their life support systems started giving false readings. "It's a sphere of electromagnetic interference," Mark explained, his voice filled with awe. "They're not attacking the fleet. They're attacking everything electronic in Alliance space at once." On her bridge, Admiral Thomas watched as the Alliance fleet tried to maintain formation without working sensors or communications. Ships bumped into each other. Some fired at shadows. Others just drifted, their crews too afraid to move without guidance. "Begin Phase 2, she ordered. Small human ships slipped through gaps in the confused Alliance fleet. They carried no weapons. Instead, they broadcast a simple message directly to the citizens of the Alliance worlds. "Your leaders started this war. They can end it. Ask them why they're letting you suffer." The Alliance's carefully controlled media network couldn't block the message. Their citizens, already angry about the collapsed economy and constant defeats, began to protest. Professor Mark showed the council this latest discovery. "Look at these weather patterns," he said. "The humans could have disrupted the Alliance's farming systems. They could have cut off their food supply. They could have. Why didn't they?" Elder Gray asked. "Because they're not trying to destroy the Alliance," Mark realized. "They're trying to save it from its own leaders." The protests grew larger. Alliance citizens demanded answers. Why had their leaders ignored the human warnings? Why had they started a war they couldn't win? Why were they still fighting? In orbit around the Alliance capital, the mighty defense fleet was falling apart. Without working electronics, most ships could barely move. Some crews abandoned their vessels. Others surrendered. A few tried to fight back, but they couldn't even find their targets. Admiral Thomas received a message from Earth Command. Offer them one last chance. She opened a channel to the Alliance capital. Despite all their electronic warfare, this signal got through perfectly clear. Your fleet is blind. Your economy is ruined. Your people want peace, and we still haven't used our actual weapons yet. Surrender now, or find out what happens when humans stop being nice. In the council chamber, the Alliance leader finally understood. His hand shaking, he pressed the button that would transmit his unconditional surrender. The humans had won without destroying a single Alliance world, without causing a single civilian death, without even using their most powerful weapons. They had won by making their enemies defeat themselves. And the galaxy would never be the same. 1 month after the Alliance's surrender, the galaxy witnessed something even more surprising than the human victory. They watched humans helping rebuild the worlds they had defeated. Ambassador Walker stood once again in the center of the council chamber. This time, nobody laughed at his words. Earth offers the following peace terms, he announced. First, all Alliance worlds will receive aid to rebuild their economies. Second, we will help repair their damaged infrastructure. Third, we will share our defense technology so this never happens again. The council chamber erupted in confused whispers. Professor Mark smiled. He had expected this. But you won, the former Alliance leader stammered. You could take everything from us. Walker's face remained serious. Taking everything from you would make you angry. And if there's one thing humans understand, it's how dangerous angry people can be. Admiral Thomas directed the reconstruction efforts herself. Human ships that had once formed a barrier of electronic warfare now delivered supplies. Engineering teams that had built secret bases now helped repair damaged stations. I don't understand, Elder Gray said to Professor Mark as they watched the rebuilding. Why are they helping their enemies? Mark showed him a historical document. After humans fought their Second World War, the winners helped rebuild their enemies' lands. Those enemies became their strongest allies. In the rebuilt Alliance capital, citizens watched in amazement as human medical teams treated their sick, human engineers fixed their systems, and human teachers shared their knowledge. We could have destroyed everything, Walker explained to the council. We could have taken your worlds, stolen your resources, enslaved your people. But that would have meant fighting again in 10 years, or 50, or 100. We would rather turn enemies into friends. Professor Mark finished his final report on human warfare. Its conclusion was simple. Humans are the deadliest species we have ever encountered, not because they are the strongest or most advanced, but because they understand something no other species does. The true purpose of war is peace. 1 year after the surrender, the Alliance worlds had recovered. Their economy was stronger than before. Their technology was more advanced. And most importantly, they had become Earth's closest allies. In the council chamber, Ambassador Walker gave his last speech before retiring. We warned you not to make us mad, he said, not because we wanted to threaten you, but because we didn't want to show you what we could do. Humans don't like fighting. We're actually quite peaceful, but when we must fight, we fight to end all fights. He looked around the chamber, meeting each delegate's eyes. Remember this lesson, he continued. Humans will always offer friendship first. We will always try peace before war. We will always warn you before we fight. But if you ignore our warnings, if you mistake kindness for weakness, you will learn why our ancestors called war hell. Professor Mark's final addition to the Galactic Archives became the most read document in Council history. It was titled, Understanding Humans, A Guide to Peace. Its opening line read, When a human says, please, they are not begging. They are giving you a chance to avoid learning why they have survived everything their harsh world could throw at them. Listen to them. Learn from them. But most importantly, never, ever make them mad. The galaxy had learned its lesson, and in the centuries that followed, Whenever a species considered attacking humans, older races would tell them a simple story. The story of how the universe learned too late why humans kept saying, "Please don't make us mad." Because sometimes, the most important warnings come in the form of polite requests.